Hi everyone. Okay, I thought I'll do a rerun of one of our videos that had a bad audio. Okay, which is on the abomination that causes desolation. Okay, so I'll just make it quick and then we just breeze through everything quick so that we don't waste time. So I'll just read from Matthew chapter 24. Okay, it says Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. And Jesus said, "Do you see all these things, all the buildings, the temple? Because I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." It says, I'll try to just skip, right? It says, they said, "Tell us, when will this happen? When will the time of the end be?" It says, "And when will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Then Jesus answered and said, "Watch out that no one deceives you." It says, "For many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." It says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars." It says, "But see to it that you are not alarmed. See to it that you are not troubled." It says, "Such things must happen." It says, "But the end is still to come." It says, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of bad pains." Okay, so let's skip. I want to save us time, that's why I'm saying let's skip. Where is it? I'm looking for that. Okay, yeah, this is where I'm going. So it says, "So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel," he says, "Let the reader understand." Jesus didn't explain, you know, what the abomination that causes desolation is. He says, whoever reads, let him understand. He says, "Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof go down to his house to take anything out of the house." It says, "Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak." It says, "How dreadful it will be in those days for nursing mothers." He says, "Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath." It says, "For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again." Then he says this, "If those days had not been cut short," he says, "no one will survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened." Now, what's Jesus trying to say? They asked him a question, right? When will all these things be? The pulling down of the temple, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Those are the very two important things we need to take note of. What will be the sign of his coming, and also at the end of the age? For the end of the age, he says, when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Okay, so in order for us to move forward on this, let's check out what Daniel said. Okay, that was in Daniel's vision, and that should be in chapter 12. Okay, so the angel speaking with Daniel said, "From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up." This is supposed to be for the end of the age, right? Don't forget. He says, the angel says, "From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days." He says, "Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days." Now, we've been taught erroneously, actually, because it's actually a wrong teaching. We've been taught that there's going to be a time period of 7 years, okay, and then after the first 3 years, the rapture will take place, and then another after the first 3.5 years. That's what they say, and then another 3.5 years, and they base it on the words of the angel, because the angel says, "From the time daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the 1,335 days." We will get back to this, but let's explain something first of all. Now, the angel now says, it's important I read this. It says, "As for you, go your way till the end, you will rest. And then at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance." There's something I want to read here also. which is very important. So, beginning from Daniel chapter 12, this is verse 1. It says, "At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then." It says, "But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book," what book? The book of life, "will be delivered." It says, "Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt." So you see, the angel is speaking about a resurrection here. But he says that multitudes will awake at the same time, and some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt. So we will get back to the abomination that causes desolation. But let's explain first of all the resurrection, because this angel talks about a resurrection here. So for us to properly understand that, let's read in the book of Revelation chapter 20. Okay, so it says, "And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, Yahweh, that ancient serpent, who is the devil, or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Threw him into the abyss, and locked and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time." So we see that Yahweh is going to be held in prison for 1,000 years. We will get somewhere else also in Isaiah regarding this being held in prison. Okay, maybe we should read that now, first of all. Then we'll come back here. It's quite interesting anyway. Okay, so if we read in the book of Isaiah, where are you? In Isaiah chapter 24, speaking of the arrest of Yahweh and being bound for 1,000 years in prison, in Isaiah chapter 24, verse 21, it says, "On that day, the Lord will punish," the true God, and through Jesus Christ, he will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. Listen very carefully. It says, on that day of Yahweh's arrest for 1,000 years, it says he will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. It says they will be headed together like prisoners bound in a dungeon. They will be shut up in prison and be punished after many days. This is Isaiah chapter 24, verse 21. So where we see in the book of Revelation, where it says that the angel coming down from heaven, of course that's Michael, because in Daniel 12, the angel says at that time, Michael, the great prince, will arise, right? And Paul also says the same thing in Thessalonians, you know. So it says here, he bound him for 1,000 years, but then we can see Isaiah's confirmation of that also. It says, on that day the Lord will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. It says they will be headed together like prisoners bound in a dungeon. They will be shut up in prison and punished after many days. After how many days? 1,000 years. They will be shut up and locked. So let's continue. It says, I saw thrones, Revelation 20, this is verse 4 now. It says, I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony for Jesus. It says, I saw all that. It says, and because of the word of God. It says, they had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received his mark. It says, they came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So what he's trying to say there is, as Michael binds the dragon, okay, and locks him up for 1,000 years, where he will be punished for 1,000 years. At that same time, a resurrection is going to take place. This is the hapazo, okay? But let's read and then we will come back to that. It says, they came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. It says the rest, important, the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who have part in the first resurrection. It says, for the second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God in the order of Melchizedek. Don't forget. They will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years. So the angel in Daniel 12 is speaking about a second resurrection, not the first resurrection. Why? How do we know that? Because it says here that the rest of the dead did not come to life, only those in Christ. And this is the hapazo. Let me explain why it is the hapazo. I'll just try to make it brief. Why it is because, very interesting. Let's read something from the book of Isaiah. It says here, but your dead will live. Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19. It says, but your dead will live, their bodies will rise. It says, you who dwell in the dust of the earth, wake up and shout for joy. Your dew is like the dew of the morning. Then it says, the earth will give birth to her dead. The world is such that, the way the world has been created is such that it brings forth, after itself. Of all things, of all living things that you see, everything dies and goes back into the ground, right? But on this day, the earth will bring forth, us. Why? But that's not even the snatching away. That's not the hapazo. The hapazo is as a result of Yahweh's covenant with death. Okay, we will read that in Isaiah 28. It says that, Isaiah 28:18, it says, your covenant with death will be annulled. We know we don't have any covenant with death, right? It's Yahweh's covenant with death, okay? Death is personified, don't forget. In the book of Revelation chapter 6, it says, and I saw the fourth rider, and I saw a pale horse, that's the fourth rider of the apocalypse. It says, and its rider was named Death, and Hades followed closely, right? So death is personalized, is personified as a person. And then Paul says that the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Don't forget. So let's continue here. Isaiah 28 verse 18, it says, your covenants with death will be annulled. Your agreements with the grave will not stand. That is to Yahweh. Yahweh's covenant with death over man. So you can see that Yahweh is not all powerful. Exactly. If he has to make a covenant with death over man, that should tell you something. So it says Yahweh's covenant with death will be annulled. Okay, and his agreement with the grave, that is Hades, Sheol, he says it will not stand. So that is the hapazo. Why? It's going to be a breaking of the covenant that Yahweh has got with death. By the forceful resurrection, the earth will give birth to its dead. We will come back to life, okay, with new bodies, immortal bodies. We will be resurrected. Now, this is the first resurrection, don't forget, just as it is said in the book of Revelation. But let's continue so that we understand the resurrection that the angel was talking about in Daniel chapter 12. So it says, and when the 1,000 years are over, after Yahweh has been punished for 1,000 years, and we've reigned with Christ as priests of God in the order of Melchizedek for 1,000 years. It says, when the 1,000 years, Revelation 20, is verse 7, when the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison, and he will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Okay? It says in number they are like the sand on the seashore. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever. At what point does this take place? The first resurrection takes place, okay, without persecution. The forceful snatching away, the hapazo takes place, okay, first of all, and then at the same time that is happening, Yahweh is going to be locked up for 1,000 years. Now keep note that life will still go on the earth. People will realize that there is a vanishing that has taken place. Now that's what Jesus is talking about in one will be taken, one will be left in the Gospels, right? That's what he said. So those who are left behind, at that moment there is no believer on earth, just for that moment only, because every believer and those who have died before, we will all be raised up and we will all reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Now during this 1,000 years, there will be believers still, people will still keep believing, because many have come to realize that yes, there's a vanishing that has taken place, So for that 1,000 years, life still goes on the earth. People will still be getting saved, okay? This video we are making, years, 1,000 years from now, 1,000+ years from now, will still be accessible on the internet, unless it's censored anyway. you know. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that life will go on. People will still be getting saved. Okay. But so after the 1,000 years are over, that is when we will come back to Daniel. When it says that from the time that the daily sacrifices are abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. It says, blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. We've been taught that these are two separate timelines, 3.5 years and 3.5 years plus a few days. That's wrong. That's not the truth. First of all, to understand this, it says from the time the daily sacrifices are abolished, from that time till when the abomination that causes desolation is set up, it will take 1,290 days from when the daily sacrifice is abolished till when the abomination that causes desolation is finally set up. What is the abomination that causes desolation? First of all, the daily sacrifice to be abolished is going to be the daily prayers held at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Okay, the mosque will be brought down. The daily prayers there will be abolished. This is after Yahweh is released, after 1,000 years. This is when this is going to take place. And then after the mosque is brought down, it will take 1,290 days for him to set up the third temple, his temple, in Jerusalem. That is the abomination that causes desolation. And it will take 3.5 years, 1,290 days for the abomination to be set up, which is the third temple. It is an abomination to Jesus, an abomination to Christ. It's an abomination to the Father. That's the truth. Okay, so I was going to continue, but let me just say something. So after it is set up, when it says, blessed is the one that waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days, from the end of the 1,290th day that the temple is finally set up, there will be an extra 45 days. That is what makes it 1,335 days in total. So it's not two separate timelines like we've been told, 3.5 years first and the rapture another 3.5 years. No, the hapazo, the rapture, will take place 1,000 years before this happens. It will take place 1,000 years. We know that the Dome of the Rock is still on that. It's a very hot issue. It's still under contest in Jerusalem. We know that. But that's going to drag for a very long time. I mean, when was the second temple destroyed? That was like 2,000 years ago. Yeah, so before this third temple is going to be done, Yahweh will first of all be locked up. The hapazo will take place. At the same time, Yahweh is going to be locked up. We will reign with Christ as priests in the order of Melchizedek for 1,000 years. After the 1,000 years, Yahweh will be released. He is furious now. He's mad. So what does he do? He gets the people to break down the mosque. Now he wants to set up his third temple. Okay? So it will take 3.5 years for them to build and construct the temple, to finish it, complete it. And then after the 290th day, there will be another 45 days. Now, this is the time of distress. And that's the reason why Jesus said, for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Why? Because there will be people, believers still on earth. Okay, people who have, after the vanishing, they've started to believe. There will still be lots of unbelievers, of course. But many also who believe in Christ will exist. So he says, for the sake of those people, those days will be cut short. Yeah, that's what he said. He says, if not, none will survive. For the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. That's what Jesus said. So like I said, after the third temple is set up, there's going to be another 45 days. Okay, now that is the sign of the end. When you see the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place, okay, Jesus said, let him that is in Judea flee. That's what Jesus says. He says, for that there will be such a time, that will be such a time as has never been seen. So anyway, let's continue back about the second resurrection, which will take place, which will be, let's read it anyway. So it says in Revelation chapter 20, verse 11, it says, then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. Earth and sky fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And meanwhile, I'll just pause a bit. Meanwhile, Yahweh's third temple will still be brought down, because a new Jerusalem will come down from heaven. Okay, that should even tell anybody with just thinking about it, you know that what's the point? That's not even the true God. So even a new temple will come down out of heaven. Okay. So anyway, let's go on. It says, and I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. It says another book was opened, which is the book of life. It says, and the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. This is the second resurrection. We are spectators to this second resurrection. Okay, and in this case now, when the angel says that multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. This is what he's talking about, the second resurrection, which will take place after the 1,000 years have ended. Because if you read it here, it says the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up their dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. It says, and each person was judged according to what he had done. It says, if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So when it says that multitudes who sleep in the dust will awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt, this is what he's saying. At that second resurrection, everyone comes back to life. Okay, both the dead and those who are living, those in Christ, those without Christ, everyone comes. This is after the 1,000 years, don't forget. Everyone comes back, and then they are now judged. Those whose names are in the book of life, they go to life. They are kept separate. Those whose names are not found, they are now thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, so I hope that this is, at least I just try to make it short so that I don't keep you guys here, you know. So what I'm trying to tell you now is this. If you notice in the gospel, Jesus said the word is the seed. That's what Jesus said. Now, try to think, what do you think is the weed that was planted by the enemy? It is false doctrine. It is false teaching. That is the weed that was planted by the enemy in the same book. So people do not understand. They study the books, and first of all, the great deception is that almost everyone believes that Yahweh is the Father of the Christ. That is the greatest deception that he's been able to pull off so far. Okay, so like I said, the word of God is the seed that has been sown. Jesus is the farmer. He's the one who's planted the word. It says an enemy came in the night and sowed weeds along with the seed. What did he say? He says, oh, when the servants asked him, should we uproot the weeds? He said, no, lest you might end up destroying the seed. He said, let them grow together. At the harvest, you separate the wheat from the seed. So this book that we call the Bible, not only is there the seed, which is the word of God in it, there is also the wheat, which is the word of Yahweh. That's what I just want you to understand. So keep that in mind when you study the books, okay? And with the spirit of discernment, you will be able to discern, okay, the words of the Father. Don't forget what he says in Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 11. He says, I know the thoughts that I have towards you. It says thoughts of good and not of evil, to bring you an expected end. Other translations say to give you a hope and a future. It's very easy for you to delineate between the words of the Father and the words of Yahweh. The Father only has thoughts of good toward us in the book, and not of evil. When you see that Yahweh saying, go and kill these people, that is evil. It's very easy for you to know who is speaking and who is saying what. I just want to pass that out so that you can, when you study on your own, you can apply these things to yourself. It will guide you. Because when it says that I know the thoughts that I have towards you, thoughts of good and not of evil, keep that in mind, that the thoughts of the Father toward you are only good. Anything you see that is evil there comes from the evil one. And the Father is pure love. Okay, there is no darkness in it. Anyway, so that's that. I think I've been able to share something. And then I'll see you guys again soon.